Now we're ready to create a light. In this version of the office scene, I have the viewport set up for advanced lighting and rendering, but there are currently no lights in the scene. And I have edged faces enabled so that I can see what I'm doing. If we hit F4 to disable edged faces, then the scene goes black because there are no lights currently. All right, I'll turn that back on with F4. Let's create a light. In the Create panel, go to the Lights panel, click on the little light bulb, and there's a pull-down list. There are 3 types of lights: Photometric, Standard, and Arnold. In this course, I'm going to try to be as renderer agnostic as possible. In other words, I'll try to maintain compatibility with different renderers and try to use features that will work more or less the same in any renderer. So I'm not going to cover the Arnold light since it only works in Arnold. If you want to learn about that, then check my other course, 3ds Max Rendering with Arnold. The photometric and standard lights will work with most renderers. The standard lights are really legacy lights that are not photometrically accurate. They use an old shading model from the 90s, and it's difficult to get realistic results. Standard lights will really only be useful if you're rendering with the legacy scanline renderer. Generally, you'll want to use the photometric light whenever possible, because it's physically accurate and will give the most realistic results. The photometric light can be configured to represent many different light sources: point light, area light, spotlight, etc. Just like the standard camera in Max, the photometric light can be targeted or free. You'll see also there's a button for Sun Positioner. That's a daylight system, and it's a separate type of light. We'll look at that later. For artificial lighting, we're going to be using the photometric lights. So let's click on the button labeled Free Light. And we immediately get the pop-up dialog, Photometric Light Creation. You're creating a photometric light. It is recommended that you use the physical camera exposure control. Would you like to change this now? Well, we actually want to say no in this dialog. Exposure control is a method for mapping physical brightness values into a certain range of brightness values in a rendering. It's just like the iris or the sensitivity settings on a real-world camera. But exposure control in Max currently applies a contrast curve to the rendering. It doesn't just shift the exposure up or down, it actually changes the balance of tones. We actually cannot turn off this tone mapping within Max's exposure control currently. And for that reason, I am no longer recommending that anyone use exposure control in Max. It changes the look of your image in a way that is destructive and sometimes difficult to control. Later in the course, we'll look at tone mapping in post. That's the proper way to apply exposure control. For now, we just want to opt out of any offer to apply exposure control. Click No. And as we move the mouse around, we're about to place a new free light somewhere. So I'll click on the floor here. And I've just created that free light. And you can see my viewport takes a moment to update because it's compiling the shaders for the new light and materials. We can grab the Move tool and bring that up, position it up in Z, and turn off edged faces with F4. All right, that's how to create a photometric light.